Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. I'm going to put a timestamp in the description box for those of you who want to skip ahead to the topic at hand, the Harkles. For those of you that don't mind a little bit of chin wagging, we're going to do that first and just have a bit of a preamble. Can I just say to you, the reason that I get in silk flowers these days is because of this. Look at these sad-looking things drooping all over, all facet, rather like a certain frostbitten toddler that we've all heard about. I bought these yesterday. That's why I gave up on the real flowers, but I suppose a bit of pink in the corner there looks rather pretty, doesn't it? Yes, so we'll have a little bit of pink to make the boys wink. But yeah, skip ahead if you don't want all of this yibba yabba. New cushions, can you see there in the background? I was telling you the other day that I was keeping an eye out, and I found them today in Camden Market. I gave them 50 quid for the two cushions. She started off saying £30 each. Then it was 50. I was going to go down to 40, but you know what? I thought, well, they need all the help they can get. They're the last antiques concern, if you will, so they told me, in Camden Market. The last remaining. I don't know if that's true. That's what they told me. It was very sad because it was once an Aladdin's cave of wonder and spectacle. Those stables, the market there in Camden Town, Stables Market, a labyrinth, a maze of wonder. Vanished now. All you've got left are Kate Moss t-shirts and an Amy Winehouse statue. So they're the cushions. They've got a sort of tapestry affair on one side and a velvet, sort of beigey, honey, champagne velvet. I'll try and throw in a close-up, but I'm pleased with them just because they're very comfortable. Really, really comfy. One for propping me up and one for hugging when I broadcast you from that sofa. And I'll do a little thing on the sofa itself because I've received some questions about it and its tapestry. It's very beautiful. Oh, and of course you can see the painting in the background. Yes, I put in a bid for it. Well, actually I went to the showroom to see it, but I'll save that for a different broadcast because it looks much more exquisite close up than from the dark painting that you can see from a distance. It's actually so splendid. We'll look into that another time, my dear. Oh, I'm all discombobulated. For those that have asked, the fireplace behind me has no fire. It's been taken out years ago, I'm afraid, my dear. It's one of my conundrums. I've got no idea what to do with it because I think the only thing that belongs in a fireplace is a fire. I know you can put books in there, you can put wine in there, I've seen. You can put bouquets, you can put in an artificial fire. Actually, that's the best thing that I've seen. I did see a rather period-looking piece that was kind of realistic and it created a sort of cosy feel, but part of me can't help but think that that's a little bit on the tacky side, but then I'm a little bit on the tacky side, so why not? I'm thinking about it, but that's why the sofa's in a rather unpractical position in front of it, my dear, aside from the fact that I am still assembling and forming my salon. Do you understand? This is going to take months, everything to get together, so everything's just thrown all over the place at the moment, my dear, in this arcade, this salon. Keepsakes for a moment. Keepsakes. I've got keepsakes here, keepsakes there. I've got keepsakes falling out of my arse at the moment, my dear. They're all over the place, not that I'm complaining. The first half of the first batch of keepsakes has now been posted, and a few people in the kingdom have begun to receive them, but only a trickle. I'm nervous that they won't get to anybody, especially all my fruits abroad, particularly those of you, of course, in America. So many of you ordered a keepsake. And the second half of that first batch will go out in the coming days. Thank you for your patience. Please check your spam, by the way, for those of you, or spam folder for those who emailed or have been in email with us and are waiting. Somebody found an email from us in their spam, but most inquiries that we received have not yet received a response from us, and I'm so sorry about that, but there was just too much demand. But have patience. Eventually we'll try and get back to all of you, but it was first come, first served, and I've got to tell you that within 5 minutes of that video going live regarding the keepsakes, it was wipeout, which is very flattering, but we've got to get and keep on it. So just have patience. But the first person to acknowledge the receipt of a keepsake was Jane Vickers. I hope she doesn't mind me saying her name, but Jane Vickers, who lost her knickers. I've had that in my head all week. Actually, I've known her name as a viewer for a while. Jane Vickers lost her knickers. That's what comes up in my mind. That's just my imagination, my dear. And she shared this fruity photograph with us. Isn't it splendid? Carmen Miranda will be dancing from the heavens, won't she? Enjoy. Thank you, therefore, for displaying the photograph that came with the keepsakes. And another viewer received hers, Lynn Mountford, up in glorious York. Hasn't she arranged everything exquisitely there, showing off some of the souvenir tokens that were sent with the keepsake and my message. With an elegant silver candelabrum, peacock feather there, and some sort of equine bust. And there was somebody else, I won't say the full name, but the surname was Nickerson. But it's written as like knickers on, knickers off, knickers all over the place, my dear. What does that remind me of? Knickers off. Oh, yeah. When I was coming through, I had a very naughty friend whose name I will not mention at this moment in time. Very naughty friend. But she used to call a sort of sex chat line. And when we were together, we'd go on it together. And we'd sort of huddle over the phone together, you know. And we'd record our message on this sort of sex hotline. And I can remember us dressed as schoolgirls one evening in her council flat in Deptford. We were deepest, darkest Deptford. This was the coup. We were there, and we used to record the message, and we'd say, "Oh, my name's Sharon, my name's Tracy. One of us is black, one of us is white, one of us is slim, one of us is curvy," and then we'd both say in unison, "We've got our knickers off." Oh dear, the memories coming right back to me. Misty watercolour memories of the way we were, you know. "We've got our knickers off." Oh, those were the days, my friend. I thought they'd never end, but they did. What's next? Some of you couldn't follow the instructions. No disparagements, my dear, but I gave you the most simple instructions in the world of how to acquire a keepsake. But still, I knew this would happen, but about a third of you didn't seem to be able to follow the instructions. Some of you sent blank emails, or some of you just said, "I want one." I'm afraid they probably won't get a response, my dear. Mary Jane Martin, I'm sure you're a wonderful and gorgeous fruit, my dear. But you sent a PayPal, well, you sent a payment or tried to send it to the email address associated with the keepsakes. That is not my email address for a start, that's my assistant's, which I told you. And that isn't connected to any PayPal account, my dear, so we can't accept money that way. But moreover, we told you not to send money until we had replied to any emails that had come in. So please don't send money to anyone, especially to an email address that doesn't have a PayPal account. And try and follow the instructions, my dear. Just send in an email. But my affection to you. I tried to tie up the keepsakes with ribbon, and they looked so smart and so pretty. Had purple ribbon and red ribbon. But the trouble with that, my dear, here in the kingdom, you see, we have small letters, large letters, and I've actually got a guide on the width of them, and these just about go through. The keepsakes go through. Well, but as soon as I put a ribbon in it and tie it in a knot, bump, bump, and they actually told me, no, that'll probably, you'll get objections for that. So I had to forego the ribbons, I'm afraid, my dear. And the envelopes inside might come in varying colours, my dear. We had the scarlet envelope, but it was running short. There's also some beautiful royal purple envelopes as well that are going out in some of them. So you'll see. And a very quick message to Lady P, who might be watching. I'm not sure, but Lady P, I want you to know that I did offer Christopher, via Christopher, a keepsake. Actually, last year I mentioned to him if you'd like one, to get in touch, but he didn't get in touch. So, but just know that I was thinking of you. I was knocked out of my chair. My socks were knocked off by the reaction and the response to the last video. Well, the last couple of videos since my return, dears. And welcome to over 1,000 new subscribers since the last video. Nice to have you here. I'm sure my basketeers will do their very best to welcome you into the fruit basket with grace. Although, to be honest, out of those 1,000 subscribers, I expect quite a few of them are returners, and lots of them are probably flouncers and announcers. You know, the kind that announce their disgust with their disappointment and then flounce off. But of course they're addicted, aren't they? Addicted to the river. So of course they return, my dear. Always the way, without exception. Shall we get on with the news at hand and the broadcast? Well, it's been a very interesting few weeks, hasn't it, my dears? The new year has kicked off with a bonfire of the vanities, and their vanity has been displayed for the entire world to see. They are what is known in the kingdom as a pair of Burkes, and that has become most apparent to the world's media. And this friction between their Montecito bugler of fiction versus facts and the tabloid press is coming to a crescendo of sorts, as everybody wakes up to their destructive ways that we've known about for some time, and they're being held to account for it, and it's quite satisfying, isn't it? And many of the whispers that I was first to recount to you and share with you, particularly from behind the scenes actually more recently, while Meg was cooking the books for Netflix on her recent show, I was the one that furnished you with those whispers, everything coming to pass. Just as I told you recently, everything matching up, coming into public view, unmasking in action. Yes, that's exactly what it is. And Harry, for example, has been selling his wares as hail fellow well met. That is how he was known to the world and how he was known to himself and how he still thinks of himself. But the fact is that in fact he is not hail fellow well met. He is vengeful, angry and paranoid, as well as being adult. And then when it comes to Meghan, to the world, she's the innocent flower. But of course, really, she's the serpent underneath. To the world, she's philanthropist, feminist, Nigerian, a benefactress of great compassion. But she's been exposed and unmasked and unveiled as a bossy britches, bossy control freak, hell-bent on a trail of destruction in her wake and of grift. Everyone can see it. The dance of the 7 veils is over, Meghan. Those veils are wearing rather threadbare. We can all see right through them, and we see through you. We see you. And even before they decide to hang out more of their dirty, skid-marked laundry for the world to see, and for an airing, the airing of her latest venture, with love, Meghan, has hit the skids, hasn't it, my dear? Before it even began, it's hit the skids. And Harry's court case, in the news this week, oh, so satisfying. His court case against the Sun has been settled. Settled! Whatever happened to your dragons, Harry? I'm going to slay those dragons. I'm going to todger in, and todger here, and todger there, and todger everywhere throughout this land, slaying dragons. Oh dear, what happened? The only mythical creature that you've been chasing around is Puff the Magic Dragon. And even old Puff would eat you alive, my dear. And we won't even go there when it comes to Puffy himself, or P. Diddy, or Ken Doddy, or whatever he's called. Pa Daddy, I don't know, I've lost count, and I don't want to know. Scorched by the sun the boy was, maybe that explains his flushed face. Burnt alive by the Sun, the tabloid newspaper. Even though they've had to shell out millions and trillions of dollars to satisfy Harry, I'm afraid it's still a big lose for Harry, because he didn't go through with this scheme, he didn't accomplish his mission. It's been a total failure. Don't let anybody tell you any different. A total failure, because you've either got principles or you ain't. And you either stick by those principles or you don't, which means you ain't principled. Do you understand? And the boy was going to see it through to conclusion. He didn't. Therefore, he fails, he flops, and he's humiliated. This mission for accountability, a sellout. A sell-out, and it's not the first time that he's taken Judas coins, is it, my dear? Not the first time dealing in those. And now Vanity Fair. Throw them to the wolves and throw them under the bus. Throw them to the wolves, they do. And I feel sorry for the wolves, because I don't think it's a very appetising dish. There's no meat on those bones, is there, my dear? They'd rather howl at the moon, I know I would. Very unflattering pictures have been painted by insiders. And before we continue, for legal reasons, I will make it quite clear that everything we're about to discuss, all the stories, all the whispers emanating from Vanity Fair, are Vanity Fair's allegations, not mine, so I'll make that quite clear from off it. But a former employee from Spotify sums up their indomitable conundrum with this line. This former employee says that the thing they are escaping is the reason they're compelling. That's what he tells them. And it's so true, because they themselves are not compelling people. It is the situation, it's the background, it's what they're escaping from. It is their royalty, or Harry's royalty, ex-royalty, and their position. It ain't them, and this is where their egos are rather confused, my dear, because Meghan, you were perfectly competent in your role as card display girl in Deal or No Deal. Perfectly competent, you made a good go of it. You brandished those numbers with believable gusto and enthusiasm, but compelling you were not. And that is why there were not casting directors from Hollywood queuing up to employ you throughout all of those hungry years, my dear, when you were vying for the ingenue. No, those years passed by. And as for Harry, compelling? Well, the ghost of J.R. Mowringer's penmanship haunted millions, that's for sure. That was certainly compelling. Compelling flights of fancy and of fiction based on your fantasies and your recollections that were variable and your downright lies. Yeah, perhaps those were compelling. But your talk show gambits with your woke chums and woke pundits and your foray into the world of polo, which should be left to Jilly Cooper, by the way, for Netflix. Who even remembers that? It was only released recently, wasn't it, my dears? Who's watching polo with Harry? Nobody. Nobody cares about it, because no one really cares about you. They care about the royals. Your alfresco liaison with Sasha Walpole is about as compelling as your romantic life gets, but the rest of it, not compelling. The thing you're escaping is the reason you're compelling. Remember that, Harry and Meghan. It's nothing to do with anything you do, or your sterling virtues, or your good work. And a former employee from Spotify says they wanted a big theme that would explain the world for archetypes, I think, and for various other projects in Netflix and stuff. But they had no ideas. Big themes, but no ideas, because they're vacant. A casual vacancy is there, and so the mind. And do you remember what Diana said? Harry's an airhead like me. Ooh, he's like me, dear. He's a bimbo. He's a bit of an airhead. Well, I'm a bit of an airhead too at times, but at least me and Diana could admit it. Harry needs to face up to things, and he's full of hot air too, otherwise known as wind. And this insider at Spotify lamented the Harkles' insistence on silence from employees. Remember how they're always harping on about having their voices stifled, muffled and silenced? Well, apparently they've been doing it to other people, issuing NDAs and all this kind of nonsense. Don't know what they're so afraid of getting out there, but apparently this has resulted in good projects getting abandoned due to their own reticence. They get nervy. Meghan gets all creative and has ideas and wants to be all risky, but then she gets all nervous and coy and no, yes, no. Who else would put up with this? Or rather, who else would they put up with this for if they didn't have HRH before their names on paper, but not publicly? If they weren't Duke or Duchess, you understand. Who else would get away with it? Well, they're not even getting away with it now because they've been brandished what they are, fucking grifters. A person who was close and working closely with Harry on the audio production of one of these ventures, recalls Harry saying something along the lines of, I had a traumatic childhood, my mother was essentially murdered. Now, I don't know if he used that exact sentence. I can imagine him using it because he dramatises everything. But conspiracies aside, whatever you believe is up to you. I tend to go with the general narrative that it was a nasty accident. You could say many people were responsible for it. The driver, the press, all had their parts to play in it. The speeding, the lack of seatbelt, Diana's partial responsibility. You could lay the blame at the doorstep of 1,000 people with regards to what happened that night. But essentially murder? No, it was not murder. Essentially or otherwise, my dear. I'm sorry. But that is typical Harry, isn't it? To dramatise, to suit his narrative and his trauma. And to be quite honest, it's unbecoming. Certainly not princely or royal. In fairness, Vanity Fair are going for them. Let's make no bones about it. But in the style of journalistic fairness, they quoted others who said that Harry has the greatest manners I've ever seen, hands down. And apparently they go on to say that it's something about supple knees. He's got supple knees. I don't want to know anything about his knees, my dear. He's got the legs of a pasty schoolboy. And he's got more knobbles on those knees than my sofa up there has got in its upholstery. And I'll tell you that it's quite knobbly. It's quite knobbly, that sofa. It's got velvet. It's lined with velvet, the bit underneath the rear when you're bouncing up and down, full of knobbles. And the trouble is, I could send it off to be reupholstered, and I should, and I want to, together with the tapestry, for a bit of repair. But even the cost to courier it there and have it back is up there in the hundreds, my dear, let alone before even getting started on all the repairs. The cost of these things. So I'm afraid it'll be knobbles on the bum for a while yet for me. But as I'm sure you'll recall, it was Bill Simmons of Spotify who described them as fucking grifters. Well, I don't care if they're fucking, if they're bronco bucking, or if they're doing the hokey cokey. A grifter's a grifter. Do you understand? A grifter is a grifter, a shirt lifter. And apparently, the idea for archetypes didn't come from Meghan's mind. So at least we can let her off the hook for that disaster and that flop. That's one flop that doesn't just sit squarely on her shoulders, apparently. Came from another employee. Not Meghan. That's what we're told. But Archewell's handling of the production process took so very long that a production arm of Spotify's called Gimlet or Gimlet was roped in to take over from Archewell, allegedly. And this incurred all kinds of additional costs and resources and all kinds of sophistry that wouldn't be put up with from anybody else. And it drove them all mad. And Vanity Fair makes a point, which we all made years ago, that archetypes wasn't even the right word for what they were discussing. They were discussing stereotypes. Stupid woman. The fools. And she claims to have such a love for etymology and words, and she didn't even know the context and meaning behind the word that she chose to title her show with. They weren't archetypes being discussed, they were stereotypes, and we all know the stereotypes that she's involved with and that apply to her. To the letter. Apparently she invited loads of celebrity chums along who declined, and she had to put up with the likes of Mindy Kaling. I'm sure is a lovely gal, but I can't remember anything about her before, after, or since. I mean, I see the name come up. Well, to be honest, I don't know who anyone is these days, my dear, but they weren't exactly a cavalcade of superstars, apart from Mariah Carey, you know. But Mariah, a bit bonkers these days, isn't she? It's not the 1990s anymore. But when a hero comes along, you embrace them. And Meghan's her own hero, isn't she? So that song really vibes with her, but she's not anybody else's except Harry's, so he thinks. Sweet, sweet fantasy baby. That's Harry's song. Fantasy world, fantasy girl. But Pariah Carey is Meghan's alter ego. And Taylor Swift turned her down, apparently. And Queen Bee herself, Beyonce, too busy. And Meghan, the stallion, whoever she is, declined. And it talks about the pattern of relationship that Meghan has with her staff and Harry with his staff. And the source who worked in media projects says that Meghan's own relationships with employees tended to follow a familiar slattern. Oh, excuse me, my dear. A misread. A familiar pattern. She would be warm and effusive at the beginning, engendering an atmosphere of professional camaraderie. When something went poorly, often due to Harry and Meghan's own demands, Meghan would become cold and withholding toward the person that she perceived to be responsible. And it goes on to say it was really, really, really awful. They're coming for her. Very painful, because she's constantly... excuse me, I need my glasses. It's getting so dark. You'll have to excuse me while I adjust to these lighting conditions, the room, the sound, the computer, everything, my dear. Everything will change and mix about. I'm just getting used to things, my dear. Discombobulated. Now you're going to get reflections, aren't you? Just for a second. Where was I? Really, really, really awful. Very painful, because she's constantly playing checkers. I'm not even going to say chess. But she's very aware of where everybody is on her board. Exactly, she's a game player. And when you are not in you are to be thrown to the wolves at any given moment. Exactly what I've said for a very long time and what I've told you. You're in, then you're out, and she'll play little games. She's one of those, my dear, you know. In practice, they say, that manifested as undermining. It's talking behind your back. It's gnawing at your sense of self. Really like Mean Girls Teenager. This is what they tell us, like the Mean Girls. And someone called Marie counterbalances that and says, she's just a lovely, genuine person. Yeah, well, so was Elizabeth Holmes. That's what they said about her, wasn't it, my dear Marie? Now we're nearly finishing. I'll admit to you, my dears, I already recorded this broadcast about an hour ago, and because I'm recording it in a different way, just on my desktop computer, somehow I deleted it. And I can't retrieve it. Couldn't be found. So this is a re-record. So if I sound a bit exasperated and tired and hoarse, my dear, it's because I've been yelling at the computer screen twice over. Anyway, we're getting there, aren't we? 2 pages of notes. It's a modus operandi. The world is seeing it. And one of the media insiders had read all of the allegations about her bullying in the past and didn't believe a word of it, thought that can't be true, it can't be true, and gave her the benefit of the doubt. And they couldn't imagine such behaviour actually happened. Well, after working with her, this insider did a flip and said that actually, on any given Tuesday this happened. On any given Tuesday this happened. Do you hear that? Do you understand this? This is a direct quote coming from a quality publication of some note and reputation, Vanity Fair. I'm not saying it's the best rag in the world, but, you know, presumably it's conscious of libel laws and what it's reporting. A genuine quote here, saying she didn't believe a word of these allegations. Saw the innocent flower. Well, now she experienced the serpent under the flower. Do you understand? And now, oh yes, on any given Tuesday it could happen. Any given Tuesday. Yeah, well, we'll see you next Tuesday, Meghan and Harry. A person who interacted with her professionally said, you can be yelled at even if someone doesn't raise their voice. You better believe it. You better believe it. You can. It's true. And I actually told you these very things months ago when I reported the whispers from behind the scenes on her latest project. I said it was more subtle. It's not that she struts in there and plays the diva and you're this and you're that and you're a bitch and you're wicked. It's all done in whispers and glances and talking about behind the backs. Everything I told you come to pass. It's funny that people don't differentiate between the energy of being yelled at and literally somebody screaming at you. This is what they say. Staff were taking leave of absence, we're told, and some of them left Gimlet, that production arm. Several of them took extended breaks to escape scrutiny from the Harkles. They exited their jobs, everything was going haywire, and some of them underwent long-term therapy. Fucking snowflakes. After working with Meghan. They're not talking about Harry, are they? Probably. Honestly. The insider said, I think if Meghan acknowledged her own shortcomings or personal contributions to situations rather than staying trapped in a victim narrative, her perception might be better. Well, I couldn't agree more, my dear insider. A permanent victim, as we know so well. Oh, Gina. At least one employee, scarred by the experience, got a handwritten note and a gift from Meghan after the experience was over. We're not talking apologies here. We're talking her usual craft. A note and a gift from Meghan. Oh, how lovely. They'd rather have one of my keepsakes, dear, in the post. One of my keepsakes would do the trick. Put one of those to them in the post instead of your poisoned pen pal Plop. Well, that's quite enough trawling through this filth for one day, isn't it, my dear? I haven't even finished the article, so we'll continue with it another time, and I can furnish you with further insights. But until then, it's ta-ra from me, and thank you for joining me. See you anon.